Yeah, hello everyone. So you see the title up here in the lab, and I'm just going to quickly start because you see we're a lot of people, and I'm just going to give you a quick little framing on why that is. And so my name's Angst, and I'm actually a political scientist and sustainability scientist. So this is probably like the funkiest conference I've ever been to in my professional life. This is really, well, it's been great. And yeah, I'm just going to give you the tiniest amount of background I think you will need to sort of understand what we'll present here. So the background is that I ran at the University of Zurich, I ran a research project for 3 years that actually aimed at capturing sustainability discourse with automated tools. So we were tracking media data, lots of data, and just automatically trying to track discourse around urban sustainability topics. And part of this project was that we wanted to have a collaboration with the local art school, which was set HDK, which is actually those two guys over there. And that collaboration sort of developed over 1 or 2 years. And its product was a lab that we ran, a course that we ran that was for PhD students from our, mostly computer science, PhD students from our university program and master students from the arts. And what we ended up was actually, we wanted to explore the intersection of discourse, sort of the urban sustainability discourse stories that are told, and textile art. And this came about because we were exploring metaphors that we always used to use, weaving stories, knitting sort of stories, whatever things. And to cut a long story short, what we ended up with was that we ran this lab, and it's really cool for me that we actually have 2 participants of the lab here that will show what they did in the lab. And for some, as it goes with these artists, when you work with them, there's always these unexpected things that happen. One thing that happened was that we found this knitting machine from the 70s, that there was a sort of hacking project that, it operated with punch cards. And there's this really, really cool project called IUP, it was All Yarns Are Beautiful, that retrofits these machines with Arduino microcontrollers so you can actually control them from a computer. And we just thought, well, let's give the participants of the course this to play with. What we didn't realize was that it would shape, the pattern-making abilities of this machine would shape a lot what would actually be done in the course. And we thought that to explore this is actually really interesting. And for me, 2 things that were really intriguing about the machine was, on the one hand, as sort of a critical digitalization researcher, I think the way of retrofitting 70s technologies with modern technology is really about sort of an unkept promise of digitalization, making past things more useful again. And then the other thing was that it's just it was really fascinating to see what it did to the participants of the course, how they engaged with this sort of weaving these sustainability stories just by the capabilities and the restrictions of the machine. Yeah, and what I'm going to do now is we're actually going to show two of the things that were done with this machine, and the first project is actually Laura's.
Yeah, it's me. Hi, so my name is Hans-Jakob Mühlethaler. This is my project, White Noise. So I wanted to somehow work with this topic of the climate crisis, and I wanted to make the climate crisis more tangible. And so I was looking at a lot of these eco-friendly labels that you find on products that you buy, or sometimes in the place where you eat, you have all these kinds of pictograms that show you if it's eco-friendly, or if there's, you can see on the right side, there's this crying palm oil tree. So this is a study, it says traurige Palme, so it means sad palm. Down there you have 2 coffee beans. I don't know what they mean, but I just wrote there friends forever. So I wanted to put these eco-friendly labels or whatever, or sustainable labels, into fabric through this machine. So, and before you use the machine, there you have the thread. You have to untangle the thread first. It's just an example. So I got a little fed up with all these echo labels because they're kind of hollow. So it was about like information and non-information, and what I ended up doing to cut things short is I wanted to knit non-information, and this was this static TV screen noise. Yes, so I put this into the machine, 100 grid, and I made these fabrics out of it, and I made these like screensavers. Maybe you can show this one, yeah. So this is a loudspeaker, and with felt and this fabric I made like screensavers and put them on the loudspeakers to make a 4-channel sound installation with them. And so it was like a system I used. I work in theater. I worked with a blind person, and we used the acoustic guidance system to work with the blind person on stage. So I used this technique also in a non-informative way to like kind of just the installation. And I made a composition with these sounds and blips I used before for the orientation. And this was then placed into the space of the exhibition on the left side, yeah, with these 4 speakers. So like the orientation became like more a non-orientation, and also a moment to experience, walk around and listen to the sound composition, which was rather abstract. So yes, this is it.
So in the lab we were introduced to a lot of techniques of pattern making, including weaving and knitting with the Hecht Brother knitting machine. And what was significant for our group was first the limitations of knitting in 2 colors. And we were thinking a lot about how can we translate a concept into 2 colors. And one of our group members still had this conductive yarn from some other project, and there was also one thing that we were encouraged to only use what we have at hand. So everything we used for the project was scraped from somewhere. So we decided to weave with the material properties of conductivity and non-conductivity. So the idea of weaving a kind of circuit was born, but in the end we kind of opted for a very simple voltage divider in which then the conductive yarn is one of the resistors, or the textile piece itself is one of the resistors, and we hooked it up to a simple ESP32 to measure the output voltage of the voltage divider, and when the textile is manipulated by hand, it just shortens the circuit, and so the electrons, they have a shorter way and the output voltage changes, and we measured that and mapped that to a PCM waveform, which is spoken human speech, and in the default it would play the speech in a level that is too slow to comprehend. While manipulating the textile, you would increase the speed of the text being spoken to make it intelligible. And this should serve as an analogy for the hyperobject, so everything that escapes our grasp because it's too big or too small or too fast or too slow, so that we cannot really understand it. To enact this perspective shift through interacting with the textile.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your projects. Can you maybe put my slides? That would be nice. I was sent by the university to be in a residency at Mario's research project and came up together with Nicole Frei, who might join online to the lab. And yeah, there's quite a chaos there. On the left side you can see an artwork by Rosemarie Trockel, which kind of inspired me in the beginning, where she just wove the famous quote by René Descartes, and you could read it as "I knit, therefore I am." That was close by after I moved to Paris, and I always had to travel to Zurich to do the course. Don't ask me why, but it was hard work, especially carrying this 20-kilo machine with my hands in the train and traveling 5 hours for a 1.5-hour lab. So not very efficient, actually, I would say, but I think it was worth it. I look back at the results and us being here today, presenting them to you. As one of the initiators of the lab, I was impressed by the resulting exchange between the different disciplines in the lab, mostly computer sciences and art students, but also by each individual project, which showed me that it was not about displaying information in another format, but rather understanding a topic through the medium of the textile. If you could move on to the next layer, there we see the exhibition which were resulting from the projects, and I wanted to go on with a little quote from a German designer called Otto Eicher. He's known for his pictograms for the Olympic Games in '72, who points out with the wordplay of German greifen, grasping, and begreifen, to grasp something, that the sensation of touch can play an important role in understanding something. Especially in our digital age, it could be not only helpful to bridge cultural, temporal, or epistemological differences, but opening towards a future which is in a vivid connection to its past and able to recycle old technologies for new thoughts. As Nicole Frei, who was also part of the planning of this course, puts it in our conclusion, which you can read online, each work became a thread in a larger fabric of inquiry. Thanks for your attention, and I would like to open the discussion to ask what you can see for potential or what you can imagine, especially when it comes to transdisciplinary or intergenerational cultural exchange through working on textiles.
Thank you very much. I love many Windows presentations. So we have time for questions. Maybe, okay.
Hi, yeah, that's interesting. So I was very struck actually by I forgot your name. Sorry, your introduction when you said that the ability to use the Arduino to repurpose this 70s machine is the promise of digital technology, and I think you're absolutely right about that. And yet, I guess my sort of question was like, is it true? Is it true that now we've moved to digital technologies, it's now easier to plug things together and repurpose them? Or have we created these kind of problematic incompatibilities and, things go out of date? And because why is this a 70s knitting machine? Could this have been done with a 90s or a 2000s knitting machine? Or is it actually because it's really old that it's possible to hack it like that? So that just sort of said all those questions about sustainability, about repurposability, about upgradability going about. And I think just this notion that the digital is sort of meant to promise that is really kind of inspiring.
Well, it's such a good question. And actually, it's absolutely true. And that's why I would say it's one of the big unkept promises of digitalization. And what struck me working with this machine was actually exactly what you said, is that it is sort of so I did this digitalization research stuff, like, right? And one of the key things about, like, what I always try to get across when understanding digitalization as a social technical process is that it should not be understood as something passive, right? As something technical. It is not technical. Digitalization is not something technical, and it should not be seen as something like a wave or something like it's actually something that we shape by the actual choices we make in what we digitize and how we shape digitalization. But this is really like a hard concept to get across. And for me, working with this machine was super illuminating, because it actually shows what you said, because you can make it sort of like very relatable, that it is actually, here this is possible. But it's actually because of some properties of how they built these machines then. And by like a lot of grunt work from like open source community and in this like this AI community. So it's actually, I actually think it's like a really interesting sort of communicative concept to work with historical machinery in sort of these digital environments, to see this tension between what digitalization has to the point, like the way we have shaped digitalization, the point we've arrived at today, and where its deficiencies are, right? Exactly, in the sense that there's little interoperability with like past machinery, which is a choice we've made, right? Like it didn't happen by accident, yeah.
Okay, another question? Maybe someone in the back? Okay, maybe I'm going to do this, and then over there.
Thank you. That was really interesting. And I really love this grasping something concept of making it tactile and understandable. I know that you've used a machine in this context. In order to digitize craft, do you feel like it has to be a machine? Could it be something more tactile, you know, something that you might make with your hands? Again, thinking about that sort of generational comment that you said at the end, there's quite a long list of like heritage crafts that are going extinct, and those could be potentially quite interesting to digitize as that sort of generational memory of crafting.
Thanks for the question. Actually, we started the lab with weaving manually on a frame. Everybody got a little frame and we started weaving. But I think, especially when it comes to motivate people to work with something, it's easier if you have kind of this machine as an icebreaker or as a kind of mystery box, where they can like then project their ideas into it and generate fastly a bigger outcome. And also, the machine is not completely automatic, so you need to go like this all the time to create your textile piece in the end. And yeah, it's an old machine, so when we got it, first thing was happening was the fuse was breaking, so we had to open it and we got into the machine somehow. Later on, also other problems appeared, and somehow the machine is more or less a tool, I would say. Can also be just a free weaving frame. There's, I think, not a big difference, but to raise more curiosity, of course, a machine with blinky numbers and sounds is way more attractive than a wooden frame, I would say.
Okay.
And it's rather violent. If you have to move it by hand, then it's a very loud noise. So it's not as social as you might experience the weaving together with the old tools. So it's kind of in between of like a old way to do it and like a modern machine fully automated.
Thank you. That was really great. I was really intrigued by the idea of like interacting with a textile to modulate sound and speech synthesis. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about like what were the words saying, and like how did that experience of doing interacting with the textile, did that affect your understanding of the words as they were being synthesized?
Actually, there is a sound, but I don't know if it's going to play. No. Anyway, so we chose, because the concept was about hyper objects, and so it was a passage from Timothy Morton, but actually, yeah, we chose the test sound, which we all kind of, it was a coincidence that we all read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. So that was actually our first idea to kind of work with this ecological grief, and so it was actually nothing in nature exists alone, and also reflecting a bit on the interconnectedness, and so also the everything being woven together, everything, yeah, so that was kind of the idea for the textile piece. Yeah, so you cannot hear it now, but it was like a really low-pitched rumbling until you would modulate the sound, which would play the C array faster, which we yeah, and that would make the words intelligible. So that was kind of the concept. Yo.
Thanks. Okay. I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I want to make a little comments or my own reflections. I found really like a kind of synchronicity between yours and the last presentation with the pattern observing, because for me now it's beyond, the story is beyond the textile metaphors. I think the machine itself becomes kind of tools for contemplation. So the whole process that I observed through your presentation, and also for that German words, greifen and begreifen. So there is something like we are using the tools, it beyond the time. It doesn't matter actually, the machine was invented in 70s and it has another social aspect, because now many women are still using these machines at home, knitting pieces of fabrics, and they also connected through internet to each other and making clubs and exchange. So the IAP is very famous actually globally, I would say. But here I found it's like a gardening, because this machine allows us to slow down and to meditate in different levels. So there is so different kind of projects coming out. So I'm really happy to see that. And just curious, what is the next further development you're going to do? Thank you.
I have no idea.
Yeah, this is why we came here, to get more ideas what we can do with it and maybe also expand. But you can see what you say, we have it also here in the picture. The people are kind of grouping around this machine. It becomes the center, and it becomes kind of a medium to talk about different topics. So it's more like, yeah, you put something in the center and then we can all talk about this machine, but actually we can bring in our own ideas, our own thoughts through the working with it. Maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, we were just exploring sort of a funding call last week, in the sense that what I find interesting is the property of the machine to act as a bridge between very different communities, and I think there's more to explore there. In the sense, in our course, it worked as a bridge to sort of connect the sort of quite scientifically minded PhD researchers from sort of my institution and the more artistic people from ZHDK. And I think there might be other bridges that could be built, right? For example, between we'd love to use it in more like community context with like people who are sort of to build a bridge between, let's say, people who are actually knitting by hand and people who are more interested in like visualizing data or something, right? Or much different. And we're going to try to explore something like that. But if you have any ideas, I mean, we're super interested in that. And I think it's just like one last thing, so Nicole doesn't kill us, our textile artist who is not here. It is actually really important that it is a knitting machine. It does not weave anything. I think that is something I learned.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I think we need to continue. And next, Paul Hollows. First, let's clap.